Hey everyone, welcome to Second Tuesdays, our writer discussion group this evening. Um, we are really pleased to have Sophfronia Scott with us. Sophfronia is a novelist, essayist, and leading contemplative thinker whose work has appeared in Time, People, the Oprah magazine, and numerous other outlets. When her first novel, All I Need to Get By, was published, she was nominated for Best New Author at the African American Literary Awards and hailed by Henry Louis Gates as one of the best writers of her generation. Her other books include Unforgivable Love, Love's Long Line, and This Child of Faith, and her newest book is The Seeker and the Monk, Everyday Conversations with Thomas Merton. Sophfronia holds degrees from Harvard and the Vermont College of Fine Arts and leads the low residency MFA program at Alma College. And of course, Sophfronia has presented at more conferences of ours than any other author that we work with. So it's always such a pleasure to have her involved in anything that we do. So Sophfronia, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Well, you're welcome, Brian. I'm glad I could make it work.
Would you like to tell folks where you are?
Well, I was just telling Brian, I'm at the King's Theater in Brooklyn because today is the launch day for the Will Smith's memoir. So I am here. He's doing a talk with Spike Lee. I'm in the VIP room. There's going to be a meet and greet afterwards. But yeah, it's an exciting evening happening here.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So, for those of you that haven't been to one of these before, it's just an informal conversation. We have a different topic and a different featured author each month. And so, sometimes we do presentations, sometimes we just talk, wherever the spirit leads us. So Sophfronia, are you going to be sharing slides tonight?
Slides? No, I am not.
I kind of assumed that would be the case, but so how would you like to lead this?
Well, let's start with the topic. Okay, so the conversation is about finishing topics, but I wanted to ask a question first. Do these discussions follow from one to the other, from month to month?
Nope.
No.
Not whatsoever.
And what did you talk about last month?
Oh gosh, I'd have to go back and look.
That's okay.
Honestly, I don't remember.
So I have no idea where everyone in this room, where you are as a writer, but what we're talking about this evening is about finishing projects. So I don't know if you started something or if you've never finished something, or if you found it really hard to finish something in the wake of the pandemic and all of the change. That's what we're talking about tonight is finishing. And as Brian knows, I finish a lot of things. I tend to finish
really.
what I'm writing. Sure. So I'm not quite sure if I have any particular tips, but I will share, to start us off, the story of the novel that I just finished. So I turned in this manuscript just last month, and it was about 6 months after the original deadline. This manuscript was due in April, but that was before I knew I was becoming the director of an MFA program, and that first residency would be happening in June. And I really tried hard to finish this book in May. I thought I would be a month late, but I finally emailed my agent and I said, I can't do it. I really can't finish this book. But I think I can finish it by the end of September. I think I can do that. Now, this was a novel, and I wrote the bulk of this novel this summer. So I only had a couple of sample chapters. This book was sold on proposal. So it was a novel. I had this complete synopsis. So I kind of knew where the story was going. But if you write fiction, you know that there's a lot of world building that has to happen, that even if you know that, she's going to go become a nurse in the Civil War, you have to figure out the conversations that make that happen. You have to figure out what it's like to be a nurse in the Civil War. You have to find the words, and you have to make it beautiful. You have to make it compelling. And And in certain ways, it took a lot longer than I thought. So I would always say to myself, I'm going to do 2 chapters today. But of course, I could barely get through one. But the thing I learned in finally finishing that book was that I had a way of working, and that it was not that different from the other books I've written, and that I couldn't be afraid to lean into that way of working, that it was okay, that no matter how it seemed like I was behind, that I had to stick to my method, which was, basically I would outline my day's work. It's like, okay, this is what I'm going to try to get through today, and this is the focus of this particular chapter. And then however long it took me, even if it was longer than a day, I would keep at this particular part of the book until it was done. Then I would move on to the next piece and the next piece and the next piece. Always knowing that even if I missed a self-created deadline, that the work was progressing, and the book was page by page, chapter by chapter, the book was happening. The reason I talk about this is because when things get crazy, right, when it seems like the outside world is interrupting what it is you're trying to do, it is your method of working that's going to ground you, that's going to give you a way through. It's like having a routine, and even if you think the routine has been upset, the discipline and the skills that you acquired while doing that routine will carry you through to finish the project. Does that help get us started? I'm not sure if this is a back and forth or how this is going.
Yeah. So anybody, please, if you'd like to ask Sophfronia a question, or if you'd like to share about your own situations, of challenges that you've had in getting things done, whether it's juggling or, earlier today we talked about basically unblocking writer's block. So that was one thing I was going to ask you, Sophfronia. Lynn Kreiderman, he's spoken at several of our conferences, and he was talking about, he had a whole bunch of different tips that, he's either used or learned or heard from others when he runs into, just not being able to write. So do you have any situations like that?
Well, to me, and this is something I learned, I used to be a journalist, way back when I was working for Time Magazine. I learned that if I was stuck, it wasn't writer's block. I was stuck because I didn't know what I wanted to say. And if I didn't know what I wanted to say, it's because there was something missing. There was research missing. I didn't understand my plot. I didn't know the story that I wanted to tell. And that meant I had to take a step back and come away from trying to write something to figure out what is the missing thing, right? So if I'm sitting there, and I'll use the novel I just finished as my example, if I'm sitting there thinking that, okay, I know I have to write about her encounter with this particular battle, and I don't even know where to begin. And that might seem like writer's block. Okay, how do I start? Is she on a horse? Is she this? And there's nothing for me to draw from, right? Because I really don't know what can happen. I don't know the possibilities of the scene. Okay, so now I go back and I'm going to go look up some of the movements of a Civil War battle. Now I can't go down a rabbit hole. I can't go looking at all of the different Civil War battles. I need to focus in and think, okay, how did movements happen from one line to the next in a battle? And if I can get that one question answered, and usually when I'm reading about that thing, it gives me an idea, and then that gets me going, and suddenly no more writer's block. You also have to ask yourself if there's a reason that you're not happy with the writing that's causing the writer's block. And here's another example. I was stuck for the longest time. Sometimes I write out of sequence, because if I'm stuck on one thing, I will go work on a different part of the book. But there was a part in this book that I could not get going. No matter how much I went and wrote around it and did other things, I couldn't do it. And it was basically an escape scene, right? So you have a slave who escapes from the plantation. Now, how many times have we seen or heard stories like that of from all the way going back to movies like Roots and 12 Years a Slave and Django Unchained, right? Harriet, like there's scenes of slaves escaping. And I couldn't write that scene. And after a while, it occurred to me that I didn't want to write the usual escape scene. I did not want to have an image of someone running through trees and having dogs chasing them and going through the water. There was something about that I didn't want to do, and it somehow didn't capture my imagination, and maybe it didn't feel right for my character either. So I didn't write it. I wasn't writing it, and I wasn't writing it. And then I realized, let me read some things. I was at a used book sale in my town, and I found a book called Runaway Slaves. And so I sat down, I started reading it, and I found this one story that was absolutely extraordinary about a husband and a wife, both slaves, and they were able to escape because his wife was fair enough to pass as white, but they dressed her up as a man. And they basically acted as though she owned him, and they traveled that way and they escaped. And I was like, yeah, okay, I love that. That is awesome. And I see my character doing that. And I know which character I'm going to pair her up for. And now suddenly I can write that, right? It's exciting. It's different. I had moments of tension in there involving their nearly getting caught and all these other things. But do you see what I mean? There's no block now because I have something to go on, and it's exciting to me. I'm not writing the usual thing, and it takes my story in a new direction. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, that's a great story.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, the process that you use to get around that.
Yeah, usually to me, if you're stuck, pick up something and read. Pick up, whether it's connected to your work or not, pick up something and read.
That was one of Lynn's suggestions too.
Yeah, I pick up something. I love Best American Short Stories, or like I said, I found this book that just happened to be about my topic. I will read a newspaper, right? Just something that will jog your imagination and say, wow, I never looked at that before. Or even the way someone wrote a sentence. My essay, Why I Didn't Go to the Firehouse. So that's an essay I wrote about Sandy Hook and why I didn't go right away to claim my child after hearing about the shooting at the school. And now that was a hard essay to begin with to write, but there was I could tell I had a block about it, and I wasn't sure what it was. And I picked up a copy of Best American Essays, and I happened upon an essay written by someone that I know, and was struck by how different the tone of the essay was from what I know of him. He's a very kind, gentlemanly person, but in this essay, he was kind of prickly and even resentful. And then it dawned on me that I'm being too nice in the essay I was trying to write, that I was prickly about it, and I wasn't letting myself be prickly. So the essay needed to take on a different tone, and reading his essay helped me connect to that, and I was able to move forward with the piece.
Wow. So another thing that Lynn suggested is, if you're having trouble creating kind of a new material, to go back and edit something that you've already written.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that?
It depends on the project. With nonfiction, I can do that. With a novel, I feel like you could fall down the rabbit hole of re-editing those first 5 chapters over and over again and not move the story forward. Because novels are notoriously difficult in the middle. Like, you can get really stuck in the middle. And if you don't like dig your heels in and capture that middle, yeah, you can go back and redo those first couple of chapters, like those first 50 pages again and again and again.
Yeah, I can see you don't want to get stuck in a loop like that.
Yeah.
So did anybody have any questions for Sophfronia about this, or any other things that you'd like to describe that you've gone through?
Does anyone have trouble finishing?
I have a ton of trouble finishing any of my projects. I always seem to have really good, easy, new ideas always coming up, and I want to move on to the next one before I can finish up the first.
Yeah, there's a phrase for that among entrepreneurs. Do you know that one, Brian? Bright, shiny object syndrome?
That is, I'm
Right?
so guilty. That is exactly the phrase that I remind myself about all the time, that I can't go
Yeah.
do, because that's my tendency too, Jacob. Is like, I want to go chase the new thing and invent something new. And, I've already started so many things, I got to tend to those first. So yes, that's a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say that the thing that I do, because ideas come up and it's wonderful to have ideas, but what I do is I keep a list, and, I will write some things down so that I don't lose that idea, but then go back to finishing the thing that I have. I actually just recently, I do have 2 novel ideas going right now, and I decided to I tend to write in spiral notebooks, like the kind with the really hard back covers that you get at Staples. But I recently bought 2 different ones so that I can, as I come up with ideas, I can start writing in each of the different ones so that I can move forward a little bit with each one. And eventually, it's because they're both new, eventually one of them will catch fire and I'll focus on one and then leave the other until I finish this one. But for right now, since I'm kind of gathering thread on both of them, I keep the 2 notebooks going.
One of the things I do to fight that issue is the use of my calendar. So my calendar is basically my to-do list. Each day, whether it's something weekly I have to do or monthly or whatever the frequency is, I'll lay that all out in my calendar. And then same thing for specific, single one-off projects or to-dos or whatever. And so I force myself to do those and schedule the new thing, whatever that new thing is, later. And I also give myself some contingency, even in the days when I'm not allowing myself to put something new like that, because all kinds of things will come up that take my time that I can't avoid. Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
But I use the calendar as my disciplinary tool to put off the shiny new object. So we got a couple of folks that raised their hand. I think Kyle was first. Hi, Kyle.
Hello. Hello, Sophfronia. So I remember handing in my very first sermon to my preaching prof when I was in seminary, and got it back, and the only comment was, "This is great, but you have 4 conclusions." So when you're talking about finishing and ending, how do you actually, see it and know that, okay, this is where things are actually drawing to a close, and not actually just keep on going and for the sake of keeping on going?
I can see that happening writing nonfiction. I mean, with the story, the story is a story, right? A novel has to end, and it's even planned out that way, right? Like I'm aiming for a certain thing, even if the ending changes. The action is going to have a certain thing. So I'm not quite sure if you mean like Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, that had like 4 different endings. But it seems to me that as you're working, at least for me, with nonfiction, it coalesces in a certain way. There's a feeling of, okay, even if I don't know what I'm talking about when I start a nonfiction piece, essentially I come to understand, this is what it's about. And then part of the editing process is going back to kind of shave away everything that doesn't have to do with that main idea. So to me, if you have 4 different endings, then there hasn't been a decision made about what the piece is about in the first place, right? And then you can go back and get rid of a false ending. Does that make sense? Does that sound like what's happening with you?
Yeah, it's gotten better over the years in terms. I write nonfiction and kind of devotional stuff, and I've had to learn in the editing process and even in the writing process that I might end, and if it's ending 1,000 words before I think it should, that's okay, and not just I'll put it in another example, right? And then it just makes it feel clunky. So trying to recognize the natural. For me, the natural flow of what I'm writing, where's the beginning, where's the middle, and where's the natural conclusion, and not feel like I just need to keep on going for this artificial word count that I'm looking for.
Right, but also thinking about why am I writing this in the first place? And then have I said that thing, right? So that way, it's not about the word count, because you may go over the word count because I haven't said the thing I want to say. Yeah. But I think you need that kind of clarity, right? That's going to help you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, clarity of focus sounds like, or focus on clarity.
Yeah.
So Rick's got his hand raised. Hi, Rick.
Yeah. Hey, Rick.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Hey, this question about like deadlines or what motivates you to complete a task. I have a small group of writers that we meet like this on Zoom once a month. And I raised that question at a recent discussion that we had. And it came down to 3 things basically with that group: deadlines, grades, and payment. Like those were the 3 motivators that everybody was saying, yeah, if I've got that. And otherwise, a lot of times it's just maybe like what Jacob was saying, like I get started on something, but if I'm not getting a grade for it and there's not a deadline and I'm not getting paid for it, then the bright, shiny object is more appealing. For me, one thing I'm doing this month, I've done a lot in nonfiction, a lot in curriculum writing, and a good bit in poetry. But what I'm doing this month is the November novel writing month type of thing.
Yeah, Nanowrimo.
Yes. So I've committed to that. And Brian, this week is really messing me up with my word count. So I'm trying to go.
Sorry about that.
But it's like I've had ideas of things I would like to do, but having a structure around that and a deadline and a community that's providing, help and resources and encouragement. I think that, I don't know if I'll get this. I know I won't get this novel done in November, but, maybe January or February, maybe I'll get something done. It'll be a first draft anyway, but I'm motivated. And I think the community aspect is something that helps me finalize something too.
I'm curious to see how it goes for you, because I've started Nanowrimo, I think like 3 times, and have never. I don't think I've gotten past the first week. It's just not the way I write. As much as I'm fascinated by that idea of generating 50,000 words in a month, although that's essentially what I did when I finished this book. I probably generated like 90,000 words in 2 months, but for some reason I can't do it for NaNoWriMo. Maybe November is just too busy for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting that they chose that month. I don't know how that came about, but I would have thought July or something like that. Maybe it would have. Yeah. For August, I don't know.
Yeah, anyway. Thanksgiving must totally throw it off for a lot of people.
Sure, of course. I mean, a lot of things going on. So Barbara wrote, a question in the chat box. She says, I'm currently finishing up my first full-length fictional novel. Everything that you've said has been quite helpful. I also have an outline or goal-setting technique. Writing 2 novellas to self-publish was much different for me than writing a full-length novel. Workshops, seminars, and writers' conferences are great networking tools. I also keep fresh by writing essays and entering contests. What things would you suggest I do before I query my manuscript?
Oh, I would like to ask a follow-up if I can. When she says query manuscript, is she looking for an agent or a publisher? If Barbara can answer that. And while we're waiting for that answer, I would say practice, like learning, I don't know what exactly she's writing the query letter for, like if it's for the novella or what it is, but she's going to need a concise description of what that book is, right?
So she's
going to be looking for an agent. Okay. So you're going to need a great description of what that book is and possibly a couple of comp titles. So you could say, this is like a new version of, what is the name of those books in Italy? My Brilliant Friend. Like, this is My Brilliant Friend, except it takes place in Idaho, or something like that. But agents want to fall in love with the story, but they also want to be able to sell it. So they have to be able to see how it would fit in the marketplace. So you want to be able to write something. I mean, think about, I like to read, the first thing I did when I picked up this book is I looked at the flat copy. I look at the copy that they write to sell the book, right? Because that's essentially what you want to put in a query letter. You want to figure out how to in a very short space, make your book sound absolutely irresistible.
It's another form of an elevator pitch.
Yeah, exactly. Although, it's like elevator pitches are even shorter when you think about it. But yeah, you want to be able to write something concise and fantastic. But I would also add, and Brian, this is why I'm glad you're doing things in person again soon. It also helps to just meet people, right? It really helps to meet that agent in person or to meet a publisher in person and to talk to them, because it's really hard to get through the slush pile and get through the noise for them to actually read a query.
Absolutely. I mean, we do. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. There's nothing that replaces that. As much as I try, to do things on online conferences, to make up for the fact that we can't be in person, but, some things you just can't replicate.
Yeah.
Good. So what
Any
else?
other questions?
Go ahead.
No, I said any other questions?
Yeah. What else do people want to chat about?
I have a question. This is hi Sophfronia, it's Phoebe.
I actually can't see who's speaking. Who is that?
This is Phoebe. Do you hear me?
Oh yeah, hey Phoebe.
Hi. Sorry, my camera's off right now.
I have to scroll through and see the names. Okay, there you are. Yes.
Yeah.
What's up?
So I know that you mentioned like having kind of a routine and certain like a discipline for how you approach your work. Have you been in a situation where you don't have full control over the when part of when you can sit down and write your 10,000 words today or whatever, you know what I mean, or do that research, and you kind of have to fit it in to different pieces of your life because of other kind of things, life that comes in your way. And then how do you continue with your discipline despite the fact that you can't, for example, always get up at the same time, or you can get up at the same time, but you don't always get that time to yourself, in the morning, or vice versa. Like if you usually plan after, say, like after a certain hour or during a certain hour, and it doesn't happen, how do you
Right.
kind of maintain your momentum, and how do you manage when you don't have like something more, set or routine?
Well, Phoebe, earlier when I was talking about discipline, I was talking about a way of working, right? A way of how you map something out, how do you work through building a manuscript. Now, what you're talking about is a time thing, and I will have to say that in finishing this novel, and not just this novel, I've had this experience with finishing other projects. Sometimes you have to tip the scale and let other stuff go. Life gets really messy, right? So laundry doesn't get done. My husband and son, like, you guys are gonna have to figure out what you're doing for dinner because I'm doing this, right? That it just, everything gets thrown off kilter. Now, I know you have small children, so it's like you really don't have control, and it's harder to do that. My son is 17 now, and I can leave him to his own devices. But I know that's harder to do when you have younger children. And all I can say to that is that you and I think you already know this, Phoebe, you find ways to write in the in-between spaces, right? And it's like taking notes with your phone, or writing. I've written essays when my son was at the playground. I would be sitting there writing while he was there at the jungle gym, right? So it's like you have to let go of trying to have a routine, because then it would be just frustrating, right? If you're constantly trying to keep to a schedule and it's constantly getting interrupted, then you would just get so frustrated to the point where you stop. And this isn't about stopping. It's about finding the different ways that you can keep going. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think I find that easier when I'm at a place where you know how, like, when you start a project, you're still researching, you're still doing, and when you have to fit it into those little spaces, sometimes it's just a matter of like reading one article that one day, right? And
Right.
and so when I find it much easier to get the writing done when I've gotten past that hill of I've done all the research and I'm ready to just, start writing things out and start drafting and start moving forward. But the path to that can really be slow.
Yeah.
And sometimes frustratingly slow. And I feel like I want to reach that. And it's hard to predict when that moment comes, when you realize I did all the, I'm there. I did as much as I can, I did enough that now I can start like putting words to this.
Yeah.
And that's where like, I'm wondering like how, is it just the way it is what it is and you just slog through it? Because like in my, and like I'm working on some projects right now and they're just, I see the little pieces and we're chipping away at it, but I feel like I need to get to the top of, once I get to the top of this mountain, then I will be able to go to the playground and, and write without, what I mean? Without getting distracted because I don't have the momentum yet,
Yeah, it's hard to find that, and I find myself saying sometimes like, oh my gosh, I forgot how hard this is. And it's like you in finishing, it's like labor, right? It's like you finish and then you forget how hard it was to have that baby. It's like, oh my gosh, here it is. And I forgot what it's like to start and to try to get into that mode when you're really into the book. And it's like the rubber meeting the road and you've gotten it. But it's like alchemy, Phoebe. I don't know how to tell you how to get there any faster. You just show up every day and eventually you get it.
All right, so no secret sauce.
Nope, sorry. Butt in chair. But sometimes though, I mean, it's like I said with the story of the runaway slave though, sometimes you need something of like, you don't know where that inspiration is going to come from, that's going to help you get in there and say, and even if it's just a response, like if you're writing something in response to something, right? Like for example, I saw you on Twitter saying something about how, about the way people were using the word joy. And I was like, oh wow, I could see Phoebe writing a whole essay on that about how we misuse joy and lose out on the opportunity for joy because of the way we use it. But yeah, so and you never know what'll get you going.
Yeah, the Amazon catalog.
Yes. Oh, that came in the mail the other day too. I go, oh, this is the thing that Phoebe threw away. Yeah.
So Rick had a question in the chat box. One of our speakers at the conference said to go into a writing thinking, what do I want to happen in the reader when this book ends? Did you do that with this book that you just completed?
No, no. I'm telling a story, and I want to be true to the characters. Now, I think it's different per medium, right? So in this story, I feel like if I'm going to tell a good story, and if I tell it well, the reader is going to enjoy it, right? I'm working on a musical right now. And from my personal experience of theater, I feel like people do come out of a show feeling a certain way. And I do think that way in writing this musical, that I want people to have a heart-filling, inspirational experience. And I keep thinking about a person walking out of the theater. It's like, okay, what's that person going to be like when at the end of this show? What are they going to be like when they stand up and get ready to leave? So it's different, but I don't think about that with a novel. I'm thinking more about the story. That's an interesting question.
What about for nonfiction?
For nonfiction, no. Although I did say when I was working on the Merton book, The Secret and the Monk, and I say this in the first chapter, I talk about how I'm sharing my experience, and I'm presenting my view of Thomas Merton, hoping that I'm modeling for you a way for you to find your own Merton, right? So I feel like people experience nonfiction through their own lens, and they are going to read it. I've always said that if you tell your story clearly enough and truly enough, that people begin to read themselves into your story, and they are reading about themselves and not you. So I have no idea. I have no control in that sense of how people are going to read my story. So my personal, nonfiction. So in that respect, I can only focus on what I'm trying to say.
Interesting. It seems like, writers have such different approaches to different things. It's really interesting to hear.
Well, but Brian, that's why I focus on saying you have to understand your way of working, because I think a lot of struggle that writers have tend to be trying to fit into somebody else's way of working. Like if you don't produce 1,000 words a day, if that's not the way you write, don't try to force yourself to do that. They say write every day, but if that's not your habit, if you're more a 2 or 3 times a day person or a week person, then do that. I'm a very project-oriented person, right? So I haven't written anything in a couple of days, but I'll be working on something next week. So it's just different. But you have to understand the way you write, right? And then lean into it as much as possible. So that, writing is hard enough as it is, then why make it worse by trying to write somebody else's way?
Other thoughts?
Hey everybody, my name's Caroline. I'm jumping on late, so this may have already been covered, and I apologize if that's the case. Really nice to be with you all. I am just starting out. I have the agent, I have the book. I'm working on my second book. I've had a lot of feedback from publishers in the Christian market saying, go out, spend a year, build your platform. If you could give a word of guidance, advice, encouragement to someone like me, or a sentence, what would that be? Because I've been working through quite a bit of discouragement, spending more time than I would like on that platform piece. but also recognizing that that is important to do. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Hopefully that's related to the topics tonight.
The one word would be authenticity. Right? If it's not true to you, if it doesn't feel right for you, then don't do it. Right? Again, this is find your way of doing platform that makes sense to you. So, for example, I have a website, and I used to blog a lot. I used to try to write a blog post at least once a week, and it was very hard because it is writing, right? If you're trying to write an essay or trying to work on a novel, then you have to stop and work on a blog post. It was just really hard. And then one day I was at a writer's event in the Catskills, and I was just thinking about how cool it was. Like, wow, this is an amazing event. There's cool stuff doing here. And I just took my phone and I just did a short video. I was like, look, I'm here, and here's what I think about all of this that's happening. And it occurred to me that that could be the thing that I do. And that became your morning walk with Sophfronia. I do these short videos almost every week, depending on the weather, where I'm just walking and talking about something that's going on in life or in writing. And that feels right to me. I like talking to people, and this is easier. I can upload it to YouTube and upload it to my social media, and it takes some time on a Friday, but then it's done. I don't engage in Twitter as much as other writers do, but then that's not me either. To be thinking about how to respond to things or to be having an ongoing conversation. Diana Butler Bass, who spoke yesterday, is so brilliant on Twitter, and she will actually, almost like a blog post, she will sit down and think about these long threads that she will create in Twitter. But that's Diana, and her audience is there, and she engages, she ministers to people even in that forum. So I would say find the thing that feels most authentic to you, even if it's only one social media platform, and do that. Talk about the things that mean something to you, because you really want to find the people who are interested in you and your writing, and the best way to do that is to be who you are.
I totally agree with what Sophfronia is saying. Caroline, what area of focus do you have? What genre, what type, what theme, things like that?
I'm working in nonfiction, specifically for women with co-occurring issues with addiction and trauma, based on my own personal experience, and then as an expert in professional experience as well. So I've actually just did an amazing interview with Heather Kopp, who wrote Sober Mercies. I'm going to be talking to Philip Yancey actually soon, which I'm just kind of shocked with that. But I'm really kind of focusing narrowly on this issue of trauma resilience, again, specifically for folks in addiction recovery community, of which I'm a part. So it's a pretty narrow focus. I have a pretty large network within that community, not so much in the Christian space, which I think is interesting. And I'm really trying to act as kind of a bridge builder, or as a bridge, because I feel like the gospel needs to be heard in that space more than it has been. And I'm trying to do that in an authentic way. But I appreciate you saying that, because that is one of the things, is like, I'm drawing the line at Reels. I don't do YouTube, but I've really had to work through kind of coming to, who am I in the social media realm or with platform and things like that. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Do you know the book Show Your Work by Austin Kleon, Kleon?
No.
There are 3 short books. One is called Steal Like an Artist. One is called Show Your Work, and I forget what the third one is. But I recommend, there are 3 little books, they're square, and I recommend all of them, because he talks about not only the creative process, but the show your work part is really cool, because he talks about how you can bring your audience along with you on the journey of creating something, right? And that's, again, that's not something that I'm great at. My friend Erica Robach will post all of these social media things about the historical research that she's doing, right? And I don't do that because I'm in it, right? And so I try to do other things to show my work, right? So I talk about it in venues like this or in my morning walks. But you know, hearing about the interviews that you're doing and that this is part of who you are, this whole experience, that you could be doing something even as you write this book, right? To show your work, to share your process, that this is the ongoing conversation that you're having, this particular topic. And that book, his books might give you some ideas on how to do that.
Thank you. I will definitely check that out. Thank you.
So Caroline, too, I would encourage you to think of this not as you're building a platform that's about you. I would encourage you to think about you have a specific target audience, right, that you just described. And I like the fact that it's relatively narrow and specific. I would encourage you to think about your number one objective is how to nourish that audience. And that nourishment does not have to come just from you. So the things that you're doing in terms of the interviews is excellent, right? Because you're bringing in other content providers, in essence, to help nourish that audience. And so I would focus on that as your objective. Become known as the go-to person in this topical area. And, particularly when you're in the situation before you actually have a book available on that topic. But you said you do interviews, but you don't do video. What are you just doing audio? Or are you just doing text? What form of interview?
So right now, just audio. I'm recording on Zoom and then sharing audio. Not really a podcast either, but I do some video on social media and, different things like that, video events. But it's mainly the reels, the Instagram reel phenomenon, which just irks me to no end. But
So have you seen on the Writing for Your Life website that I've done a ton of book launch interviews with authors when they're launching their books. There's a whole page that's got, I don't know, hundreds probably by now of book launch interviews. And that's my purpose of doing that. Number one is to provide nourishment for my audience about all these wonderful new books that people are bringing out. I mean, the second thing that it does is help me build relationships with authors that I might not otherwise have reason to talk to them about. And in your case, since you said you've got a really good network in your area of interest, your area of specialization, take advantage of that network to foster relationships, deeper relationships with those things, because those are win-win situations, because you're creating content that's useful for your audience. It's probably useful for their audience too, and for them. So, and the more you build those kinds of relationships, I've found later on, those relationships will probably become of some type of value to you and to the other person that you have no idea about now. Right. And that happened to me big time this last year when I published How to Heal Our Divides. You know, it was an anthology of 33 different contributors. I had no idea that I was going to do a book like that. No idea. But because of all the relationships that I had fostered, when I decided that I wanted to, I just started making emails and phone calls and whatever. And like that, almost instantaneously, I had 33 people that said yes, without even knowing who most of the people were contributing to the book, without me paying them anything up front to do this, and without knowing what all these other people were going to write about. So they were willing to trust me that I was going to do the right thing and, putting this together. So it just kind of speaks to the power of these relationships, these strong, high trust relationships that you build, and how they could be of value to you and to the other person in ways that you never predicted. And doing the interviews is a wonderful way to do that.
I will definitely check more of those out. I actually just found your website today, so I'm looking through. I'm going to be at the conferences. I'm really excited.
Oh, good.
Nice to see you all. Thank you.
Sure. So let's see. A couple different things. Let's see. Phoebe was asking Sophfronia if you have a warm-up practice.
No. um, if I wouldn't call it a warm-up practice. If I feel like I want to just like, because I tend to write by hand, but I also, type on a computer, that if I want to just get some things moving in my head, I do journal, right? And sometimes it's like blogging where I feel like, oh, I'm spending time on this, shouldn't I be writing? But journaling is important to me. And a lot of what's in my journal eventually does end up in my books. So I like to capture the essence of a time, right? I like to sit down in the morning and think about what's happened over the course of the past couple of days, or to rage at something that I'm frustrated about, It's like it helps me feel my voice, right? But I don't, unless I'm at a workshop or something, I don't like sit down with a writing prompt necessarily. And Phoebe gave me a book about, write one thing every day. And I keep that book on my desk, and I look at that book and I feel like, should I be trying to write in this book? But I haven't yet. And I was thinking about this just the other day. It's funny you're here, Phoebe, because I'm looking at that book and it's not part of my practice. It's just not, And I know a lot of writers do that. But for me to, I wanted to try it, but it's just not the way I work. Isn't that weird? It's not.
So one of the folks mentioned, that they just love your morning walks, and I think that was a brilliant idea, Sophfronia. And, just as like you were describing it, kind of something that just fell out of the sky, that, you didn't kind of wander around thinking about, looking for something like that. It kind of just happened and it's worked out incredibly well for you, I think. And that was the same thing for me with these interviews that I was talking about. I never thought about doing that until the pandemic hit. And when I knew that all of my author friends are not going to be able to go to all their speaking engagements that they had planned. Right. When they're launching a new book, they wouldn't be able to do book tours and book signings. So I said, oh my gosh, I need to provide them, with some way of reaching their fans, reaching their audience, and also getting the word about their new books. I had no idea that all these other byproducts that I was describing earlier would be part of it. So, it's just, you can't predict all this stuff.
Yeah, and you, in a way, it forced you to be consistent with it too, right? So, and you do, everything you do, it seems to me, Brian, has a orderliness to it. Like you don't just do it, you find some way to do it every week or every month or,
Well, you're right.
There's just a regularity.
If I do decide to do something, I'm going to see it through. Consistency is a big goal for me.
Yeah, and I felt that the morning walks didn't really solidify for me until I decided to give myself the challenge of forcing myself to do one every single week for an entire year. And after that, I figured no matter what happened after that it would have a feeling, that I would have a sense of what it was, and that it would be, it would be real somehow after that. And that's exactly what it became.
I started writing for your life in like the middle of 2016. And until a couple of months ago, I put an email out every single week. I was really religious about not ever skipping a single week. So that was, whatever that was, 5 years. And in the meantime, I started publishing in color, I started Compassion Christianity, started How to Heal Our Divides. So I basically ended up with 4 weekly email newsletters. And with that and everything else I do, I finally concluded that was too much. So just, a couple months ago, I backed off so that I only do them every other week. So one week I'll do Writing for Your Life and How to Heal Our Divides. The other week I'll do Publishing Color and Compassion Christianity. So they all come out every other week now. So I did do that. I let myself off the hook, to slack up on my frequency a little bit. And I've gotten good feedback about that too. But yeah, I think, the consistency part of it, the discipline part of it is very important, very helpful.
And that is practice for finishing a bigger project, really, right? That you complete small stuff on a regular basis that helps you do what you need to do to finish a big project.
Yeah. So Rick's got his hand up.
Yes.
Hey, Rick.
Hi, I just thought it'd be helpful if anybody doesn't know about the morning walks, like what that is. But I also wanted to ask you, like, how you do that. Like, are you walking? It doesn't look like you're reading notes or anything. It's like you've prepared what you're going to say ahead of time, and then you do it by rote, or you just wing it, or how are you doing that?
I usually in the shower that morning, I usually think about, well, what do I want to talk about today? Right? What has just happened? The one I just did this past Friday, right? Was inspired just by what my son wore to school that morning, right? So no, I don't have notes unless I know that I want to make, like, if it's like 3 points and I want to make sure that I don't forget those points, I might have to write them down so that I remember them. But no, usually it's just me talking. I have a selfie stick with a gimbal on it. It's called a Smove, SMOVE, and that's how I can do it without the camera shaking. So it's just me holding a selfie stick and walking, and I usually do it in just one take, because it's meant to be easy, right? It's not meant to be tortured or to do this over and over again. So I usually try to do it in just one take and hit the button and go. And when I'm done, I'm done. And then I go back home and upload it.
Thank you.
Well, they are kind of like amazingly professional looking, despite that approach.
That's funny, Brian, but I don't think they do, because when I look at the stuff on YouTube and people have they have captions and like music on some of them and credits and stuff. It's like,
yeah, but who cares? People are looking for authenticity, right? And that is a good conveyance of authenticity as far as I'm concerned. It's very natural. It's very in place, so I think substance is way more important than frivolous bells and whistles. I know everybody's different on that, but that's the way I feel. All right, so we've reached our hour, and I really want to let Sophfronia go to this big event that she was fortunate to be able to get to tonight. So Sophfronia, thank you so much for going out of your way to still do this with us tonight. I really appreciate that.
Oh, I'm happy I could be here. I'm glad it worked out.
Thank you, Sophfronia.
All right. Thanks, Phoebe. Thank you all for being here.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, for being here. It's great to see everyone. You all take care.